I'm Joyce Jackson from the Richland Chronicle, and I'm here today to talk with Bob Davis.
Thank you.
Who has written his fourth book, Star Child. We're going to find out all about this book today.
All right.
Could you tell us a little about yourself first, Bob?
All right, thank you. First, let me say I'm really jazzed to be here at Richland and to be able to work with the guys in the TV
glad to
studio.
have you.
This is really fun. I have been at Richland now for 40 years as an English teacher, teaching 1301 primarily, composition classes. I taught American literature for several years, and then it all went online. And so now I have my 1301 class. In fact, it meets this evening at 5:40, and we'll talk about good writing and writing that can be improved.
And that's a composition class,
It's
isn't
a
it?
composition class. And in addition to working here part-time, I'm also an adjunct instructor at University of Texas at Dallas, in the sense that I am a field supervisor with the Teacher Development Center, and my task is to go out to different middle school and high school campuses in the area and to observe young men and women as they are doing their teacher performance in the classroom and helping them become exemplary teachers so that they will be able to have their own classroom in subsequent years. It's been a lot of fun.
It sounds like an interesting job.
It is. Every day is a new day with student teachers.
Keeps you busy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Hopping like a one-legged man at a dance contest.
Wow. Well, how did you get started writing books in the first place?
When I was 7 years old, I asked my mother what I thought was an important question. I had seen a cartoon about Pepe Le Pew, and I said, "Mom, where do skunks get a stink?" And she said, "Well, I don't know, but if you're interested and you're curious, maybe you should write a story." So I wrote in my very cramped handwriting a 2-3 page story and determined that skunks have stink because they do not sit in nice places. And she still has that story framed somewhere, and every now and then she'll ask me if I'm getting stinky with my writing.
Well, that's a nice little story.
Yeah, thank you.
But we're here to talk about Star Child.
Yes,
Could you
indeed.
show us the cover?
All right. The cover of the book is from the Hubble Heritage team. And when I had finished the manuscript to the best of my ability and was in a quandary what the cover should be, I decided, well, the title is Star Child. Let me see if I can find something that from the heavens would give a suggestion. And I want you, as you're out there observing our little program here, I want you to see that the parallel lines intersect into something like a cross. At the center of the cross is this blazing yellow light, which I imagined in sort of a visionary way that this was the young girl's head. And as Joyce is tracing it, this off to the side could be her disheveled hair, the tresses that she had coming down from one side of her head. So I looked at that and I said, that's my star child in deep space, and this is the Julia that I'm going to write about.
Now let's talk about the characters.
All right.
How many are in your story?
Well, in a sense, the book is both fiction and nonfiction. It's fiction in this sense. The story is about my granddaughter, Julia, who is 2 years old. And I realized that if I put her 10 years ahead in the story, she'd be 12, which wouldn't be a problem for her. But if I add 10 years to myself, I'm going to be more than Social Security age. So I thought, well, what I ought to do is to have myself at my present age, thank you, and identify Julia as being 10 years older. So it's about a young girl and an old man named Gramps. Grampy, and they go on a variety of adventures. The storybook is 12 stories long, and each story is a different month of the year. And so what you see is basically a book in which the young girl and Grampy go on a long series of adventures throughout rural Texas. Along the way, they have a great many adventures.
Your book has, I think, 76 pages?
It has 76 pages, and it took I would say probably 3 years to put the book in a finished form. Before the baby was born, I thought there must be something that I could write about her that she would have as a memorable item growing up. And at first it was just a simple story. From there it sort of evolved into a series of stories. It was something like a snowball going down the hill. There was an avalanche of a crescendo of ideas and images, if you will. And from that just came the idea of, well, why don't I imagine stories about a young girl and her grandfather, and they're going out and they're finding new things to do, and every day is a day of discovery.
Could you show us the back cover?
Oh.
Because where is this?
Okay. For those of you who are local, and I mean really local, the Garland Saxe-Wiley area. If you go out past the Firewheel Mall, going north on 78 toward Wiley and Saxe, this is the Cotton Belt caboose that's right there at the Saxe Railroad tracks. And so as the first story is called Highballing It, which is a railroad term for how trains move fast on the rails, this was one of the stories about a Cotton Belt caboose, and it really did segue neatly into one of the stories. So in a sense, the reader will go from deep space to the other side of Garland
Well, that's one way
and
to
have
put
all
it,
kinds of
isn't it?
stories to tell in between.
Deep space, huh? That's very nice. Nice way of putting it. Now tell me, did you self-publish this book?
The first 3 books that I have published were all published by different publishing entities. But this one I published online because I thought that I wanted to get the book out while Julia was still young, and I didn't want to go through the business of trying to secure an agent, which is very expensive, or sending the manuscript out through a plethora of publishers and having them all send the manuscript back with a nice little form letter. So I took the initiative and had the book printed on my own and paid for it. And the cool thing about it is the print shop here on campus has a business relationship with a printing company called iDoc, and I was able to work with that organization in getting the book published. And the cool thing about doing this as an online e-copy was that I got to work one-on-one with the VP of printing here, and he and I had several sessions together discussing what I wanted in the book and what I was willing to invest in. So it worked pretty well in that regard.
Sounds like a very good deal. Now that was I-capital-D-O-C, right?
I-capital-D-O-C, yeah, and they're in Dallas.
They're located in Dallas?
Yeah.
Do they have an office?
They have one off of Stemmons and off of 30 there. I have not been there, but they tell me that's where they publish.
Oh, okay, and you should believe them.
Yeah.
Well, when you self-publish, it does cost you, right?
Yes, and
what do you pay for then? Just printing?
What you're doing is paying for the printing of the book, the images. There are several photographs within the book, and then of course the cover itself. For beginning writers, this might be an encouraging way to start out, to get your book into a wider audience, to be able to perhaps do some consignment with different bookstores and see if there would be an opportunity for them to pick up the book and sell it at a percentage for you. I think online publishing is probably a wave of the future, given the fact that the print material is shrinking, and in the same breath, the readership in America is shrinking as well.
Are you going to try other bookstores like the UTD bookstore?
I have, and I'm also going to work with one of my sons, Ian Davis, and he's going to help me get the book on Amazon, and so maybe then from there we'll be able to sell the book online, which would be quite an interesting idea, I think.
Have you heard anything from Amazon yet?
I haven't explored them yet. That's what I'm going to do that with my free time between grading papers in the next 2 weeks.
Have you self-published? You haven't self-published all of your books, have you?
No, the other books were all picked up by publishers. The first book is really a flip book, Turtle Going Nowhere in the Plenty of Time, and the other side of that is Mariposa, which is a book about a very spiritual creature, a monarch butterfly sort of, who travels from Canada all the way to El Rosario. It's her story. That book was published in California by Naturegraph Publishers. A second book that came out about 5 years later was entitled Galveston Cats. For those of you who are Texas history buffs, you'll know that in 1900 there was a huge storm called the Great Storm of 1900. It obliterated the island. 6,000 people or more lost their lives in one night. And I thought about that for years. And I have to tell you, as a writer, sometimes you see an idea, is deposited in the humus of your mind, and it grows, it blossoms, it flowers, and it becomes the idea for a story or even a book. So from that terrible event, I imagined 100 years later of cats, Galveston cats, all coming around and telling a story that they heard from their own elder felines about what happened that fateful day, September 8th, 1900. again, it was fun to write, and if you like cats, you'll know immediately what I'm saying when I tell you that cats see us, we humans, as human pets.
Well, I'm a cat lover, so
Well, okay,
I'm going to
Joy.
read your book.
You know that one then.
Now, did you mention all three of them?
The other one, thank you. The other one was published over at SMU, and that one was not a fictional prose book. It was a book of poetry called 87 Million Honkers. And before you think bad of me, honkers has an original meaning, and I shall share it with you. When I was a boy reading comic books, I read comic books insatiably. There were a series of comics published not by Marvel, but a company in good stead. And it was about two Native Americans who got lost somewhere around El Paso and found an underground cavern and wound up in a new world. Take that, Spielberg, before there was a Jurassic World. There was Turok and Andar, and they saw all these huge dinosaurs. Theodonts, enormous carnivorous dinosaurs. But since they all made long, loud sounds like honk, he decided, the Indians did, that they would call them honkers. So I imagined a book of poetry that had 87 million dinosaurs in it. Actually, there's not a poem in there about dinosaurs, but there are some good growing up poems.
Okay. Well, now, excuse me.
Yes.
As far as getting back to Star of Child,
Yes.
you said it took you about 3 years to write.
It
right?
did. And again, for those of you who aspire to be writers, realize that the process writing, the brainstorming, that's wonderful. You can sit and drink coffee all day and brainstorm. But the discipline of writing is a task. And more than the discipline of sitting down and thinking and writing is the larger task of endlessly editing and revising your copy. I would say I spent about a year, 18 months writing copy and polishing copy. But I spent another year, at least, doing nothing but taking each story and refining it, revising it, going back and saying, is there a more compact way to write this? Is there another way that I can write this more clearly so that my audience will read and understand what I'm saying? Think of a large piece of rock, like turquoise or crystal, and it's all grainy and it's got lots of non-crystalline parts in it. You have to work it, polishing it and refining it so you get the sharp crystalline features, the dark hues of color. From there, you actually have, by analogy, you have a book that's readable, a book that you could put down and say, I hope people will see it as a page turner. In the publishing business, a page turner is a book that will sell.
Interesting.
Thank you, Joyce.
Now you need to tell us about your family because they play a big role in this book.
Indeed.
You have 3 sons,
I have 3 sons. My oldest son, Brian, is the father of Julia, and they now have a second baby, a little boy named Luke. My middle son just recently married. He's married to a young lady named Meredith, and Meredith has a daughter named Vivian. And my third son, my youngest son, who is a Sunnyvale fireman, has a young wife, and they have a young son named Micah Charles, and they're getting ready. She is now in the family way, I can say that, and it looks like in July they'll have a second baby. So from not having any children at all for years and years and years, suddenly it looks like the water has become more enjoyable to drink because there's fertility all over the place.
Oh my, boy, that's great. Now, I noticed you mentioned Candice. Now, which
Candice,
wife is she?
Candice is, well, the daughters here, daughter-in-law is Brian's wife, Lori, Ian's wife, Meredith, and Ethan's wife, Candice. And Candice was responsible for all the Photoshop work that makes the book visually exciting.
Did she take the pictures?
I took the picture and she modified it so it would fit the cover so IDOT could print it and it would look like an eye-catching visual there. So she was very responsible for all the visuals as well as setting the photographs that I did. I did a photograph for each of the stories to introduce the story, and she was able to really do that in a very effective Photoshop way. The book would have been in the back of my pocket like a diary if I hadn't had all of her help with the images here.
Now, you must tell us what role your wife Heidi had in playing in this book.
I give it all over to my wife here because my wife is my editor. Years ago, or many moons if you will, I worked for the Richardson newspaper, the suburban newspaper, and I wrote a weekly column. That ran for about 14 years. And every piece that I submitted to the newspaper, my dear wife Heidi always looked at. And she had such a sweet way of saying, this is good, this is crap, don't write this, don't print this stuff. And so I leaned upon her for the ulterior voice that would calm down my writing. And I thank her to this day because she was able to calm the anxiety that all writers have about, is it good enough, is this still crap? And so she was helpful. And I give thanks that I have such a wife that helps me in that regard. And she does a great many other things very well, too.
So what's the general consensus of Star Child from your family?
Well, I have to go out on a limb on this and say I hope that everyone liked the book. They all got a copy over the Christmas holidays. And if they don't like the book and they think it's bad, I don't know what to say is other than, gee, if they think it sucks, at least I hope it didn't swallow.
Let's hope not. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all seem to like it.
But how about your sons now? Since they have other children, are they going to want you to write a book about any of their other children?
I've had an ear bath on that. Well, now that you've written about Julia, why don't you write about Micah? And now that you've written about Micah, don't forget, we may have more children. We'll just line them all up like dominoes. You can write one about each one. And I see now the peril that writers have, strong published writers, great writers that we read about, that once they finished a book, I think they would call it a labor of love, but then there's an emptiness. Well, what do I write next? What's the next book? And I'm still on the pin of the needle like the angels are on what would be the next book. I've come up with some thoughts, but nothing that I would utter in public that wouldn't sound like a shambles.
Okay, well then I won't ask you any more about that. Now, how about where you wrote this book? I know, there's a lot of struggling writers out there, including myself, and we're curious as to people like you who write a successful book. Where did you write it? I mean, in your study, at school?
I have a little computer study in the house. It looks like a very small library, and although I'm not really all that hip on computers, I was able to sit and type and type and type. And we did pretty well on that, but every day was a labor of love. Type a chapter in the morning, read a chapter in the afternoon. And so it was a chance to do that ongoing work and be as effective as possible.
Well, how did you feel when you finished the book?
In a sense, and I'm only speaking for myself as a writer, I think I can know something as a man, only from a great distance, what it's like when a woman has a baby. It was
Really?
it was that great a sensation. In a sense, every book you write is a child of the mind. There's the story of in the Greek legends here of Athena, born out of Zeus's head, inspiration. So it's taken some time to be inspired, to sit and think and write, and so it's taken a while.
Okay. Now, what part of that book was the most difficult for you, that you had the most problem with?
Actually, I intended to share part of a story, which is actually the first story that I wrote, called Old Nutter. But I think the hardest thing was to realize that my game plan was to write a story that would connect with a different month of the year, there being 12 stories, 12 calendar months. And so part of the struggle was to be able to put into each story something that would be relevant to that specific month. So, for example, the story about Old Nutter's Promise takes place in October. As an old green thumb farmer here, gentleman, backyard farmer, so to speak, October is the month when you harvest the pecans. And so it sort of was natural to talk about writing a story about squirrels getting pecans, because they sure as heck got a lot out of my pecan tree, and that was sort of the basis for that story.
I like that story. I love squirrels. Well, and you've printed how many copies?
This one I had an initial order of 50 copies, 7 of which are now over at the campus bookstore, and I've sent out several to family and friends, and I still have about a dozen copies left. And as far as the marketing strategy for 50 books goes, I'm trying to put it in as many people, in the hands of as many people as possible, so that they could read the book and say something like Inspector Gadget said all those years ago, "Wowzers!" That they liked the book. We'll see.
Yes. Okay. And one last question.
Go.
Who do you think would be most interested in your book specifically?
It really has a dual audience. part of the charm of the book is Julia's questions about why things are the way they are. In that sense, it goes back to an old book I read as a child, the Mother West Wind stories, which always had animal characters, and they always were asking why questions, which in a sense are the starting point for good writing. So each of the stories has a why question. It begins with a question, and each story kind of comes full circle. The hardest part, I think, was just finding the appropriate setting for each particular month so that I didn't go off on a tangent and write something. Oh, it's July, and now we're going to start growing lettuce and spinach. Well, it won't work in Texas in July and August.
And you're a true Texan, right?
Aye, fourth generation.
Yes, okay. Yes. Well, I've enjoyed speaking with you about your new book.
Oh, thank you, Joyce.
We'll end it there. I think we have enough.
All right. Thank you.
I'm Joyce Jackson from the Richland Chronicle, and it was very nice talking to you about it.
Thank you, Joyce. It's always a pleasure to visit with you and the wonderful people on camera.